This video will show you why join EuroCham Cambodia.
What is EuroCham? EuroCham is the European Chamber of Commerce and the leading foreign business association in Cambodia.
EuroCham's core activities are promoting, supporting, and representing its members
and sustainable business interests in Cambodia.
Since 2011, EuroCham has grown to over 300 members and 6 national chapters.
Joining EuroCham can help you to grow your business in the kingdom.
Who can join? EuroCham is open to everybody. Locals and foreigners, companies, small and large, and individuals are all eligible to become EuroCham members.
We are looking for new startups or small and medium-sized enterprises that are looking to grow.
Why join EuroCham? EuroCham provides unique opportunities and events that help you network with like-minded people and organizations.
Becoming a EuroCham member will help build the visibility of your business both here in Cambodia as well as regionally and internationally.
By joining us, you are giving yourself a bigger, louder voice, a voice that can be heard further away than ever before.
EuroCham membership helps you to grow your network,
have a voice in shaping policies,
take advantage of training,
increase your company's visibility,
build the right team.
EuroCham represents opportunity.
Opportunity to build, to grow, to expand, and develop.
Visit our website today and become a EuroCham member.
សូមជម្រាបសួរនិងអរុនសួស្តីពីសភាពាណិជ្ជកម្មរដ្ឋប្រចាំនៅកម្ពុជា So good morning, His Excellency, guest speakers, members, partners, and also ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's webinar session on the new regulation on e-commerce in Cambodia. Today's webinar is organized by the Ministry of Commerce and the Asian Development Bank in association with EuroCham Cambodia. My name is Ratana. I'm the event and membership managers here at EuroCham Cambodia. Session, our speakers will go through the main points of e-commerce law and its implementation regulations, and also discussing what are the key compliant and the types of entities of e-commerce activities that could be affected and what action is needed to avoid fines and unnecessary penalties in the futures. So that is why today we have the great honors and in today's webinar session and presided over by His Excellency SOK Sopheak, Secretary of State at the Ministry of Commerce, and also His Excellency Dararith, who is the advisor to the Ministry of Commerce and also the Directors of Business Registration Department. And also we are joined, of course, by many other panelists from the legal and private sectors representative. So in today, around 2 hours, covering presentation and panel discussion, and as well as Q&A session at the end. So before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to quickly just the opportunity to thank our platinum and gold partners of EuroCham for their support and trust throughout the years. I would like also to remind our audience in today's webinars to drop your comments in the chat box below, while also addressing your questions in the Q&A box session. You can already do so from the beginning of these webinars, because later our moderators will try his best to answer your question at the end. And also another important to know is that today's webinar session is enabled with the interpretation functions, whereas His Excellency will deliver his presentation in Khmer languages. So for those who prefer, please click on the globe function interpretation below and choose the right languages as you prefer. And please try to mute the original audio voice to avoid echoing. So without any further delay, I would like to invite Mr. Guillaume MASSIN, DFDL legal expert and also ADB consultant, for his introduction to today's webinar. Thank you, Guillaume.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished members of the public and private sectors. Let me begin by welcoming you to this webinar hosted by the Ministry of Commerce and the Asian Development Bank with the collaboration of EuroCham. We would like to thank the government agencies attending this session, as well as the participants from the private sector and the members of EuroCham. ADB and the Royal Government of Cambodia have been working together in support of the financial sector development since 1999. The e-commerce law program was one of the policy reforms under the Inclusive Financial Sector Development Program. That program had the objective of assisting the government for the development of a resilient and efficient financial system through the establishment of modernized payments and settlements system. The completion of the law on e-commerce and the drafting of its implementing regulations is a crucial part of this program. It was based on the consideration that technology is probably the most effective means of quickly and efficiently increasing financial inclusion, and that Cambodia first needed an enabling framework. This was accomplished with the e-commerce law, which provides a variety of solutions to increase financial inclusion in Cambodia and provides increased opportunities for its people. The two last events we organized as part of the ADB e-commerce law program were held before the enactment of the law, which is now in force since last year. These events were organized to receive feedback and recommendations from the private sector. For today's event, the objective is to conduct a review of the first year of the implementation of the law and inform the public on the implementing regulations that have been passed to further contribute to the development of the e-commerce framework. We also want to provide you with an opportunity to discuss with the authorities directly and identify how we together can contribute to resolving any issues. We sincerely hope that this will be a productive event. And I will let Denis SAINTE-MARIE, Executive Director of EuroCham, co-organizer of this event, to share his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. Good morning, everyone, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for EuroCham to be part to this important event today. I would like to thank Your Excellency SOK Sopheak and Dararith in particular, as well as the EuroCham speakers and ADB for making this event possible. As already illustrated by Guillaume, MASSIN, by Mr. Guillaume MASSIN, this webinar with the Ministry of Commerce, ADB, and EuroCham show the constructive and fruitful cooperation that exists between the Royal Government of Cambodia, the development sector, and the private sector. All these three pillars together form a solid partnership to build the future. Together and by combining our strength and our expertise, we can continue to pull the country forward. It is what we need now to overcome the struggles we are currently facing. The e-commerce law and the regulations, the implementing regulations, and the recently launched 2021-2035 Cambodia Digital Economy and Social Policy Framework are only one example of that long-term vision and the leadership of the Royal Government of Cambodia. As private sector, we are very thankful for this achievement and contributions, and also to be part of the consultation process. We continue to work together with our members of sectorial committees, the Royal Government of Cambodia, and development partner to do our part in further developing Cambodia and attractive investment destination. Thank you very much, everyone. I wish you all an interesting morning. Hope to meet you soon in person. And now, respectfully, I wish to hand over the floor to His Excellency SOK Sopheak.
Thank you, Denis. So as mentioned, I would like to welcome His Excellency, Mr. SOK Sopheak, for his keynote speech this morning. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, I just start with a few English. Mr. Guillaume MASSIN, the FDL and ADB consultant. Mr. Denis Marie, Executive on Dararith, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to everybody. It is my great pleasure and honor for remarks, and I am trusted by my minister to deliver this remark. And I would like to express my appreciation and thanks to the ADB for the support and technical assistance provided, and also the EuroCham for the cooperation in organizing this seminar. So I would like to invite you to prepare your headset. The following I would speak in Khmer. សូមគោរពអាដាមលោកស្រីដែលបានចូលរួមនៅក្នុងសកាសាលាតាម website នៅថ្ងៃនេះ នេះជាកិត្តិយសដែលខ្ញុំបានទទួលពីអាដាមរដ្ឋមន្ត្រីក្នុងការដល់នៅសន្ទរកបើកនៅក្នុងសកាសាលាដ៏សំខាន់នេះដោយអាដាមលោកស្រីបានជ្រាបហើយថាសកាសាលានេះជាសកាសាលាលើកទី 3 ហើយដែលមានការចូលរួមពី ADB ហើយនិង EuroCham Cambodia ហើយសកាសាលានេះគឺរៀបចំឡើងនៅក្នុងកលៈទេសៈដែលប្រទេសជាតិយើងកំពុងទទួលរងនៅឥទ្ធិពលអវិជ្ជមាននៃ COVID-19 ដែលបានធ្វើឲ្យប៉ះពាល់យ៉ាងធ្ងន់ធ្ងរទៅដល់សេដ្ឋកិច្ចតំបន់និងសេដ្ឋកិច្ចពិភពលោកព្រមទាំងសេដ្ឋកិច្ចកម្ពុជាជាពិសេស
in Cambodia as well. The purpose of this workshop, as you're well aware, that will disseminate the various regulation laws concerning e-commerce and the law that we have developed and approved by the National Assembly, Senate, and the King since 2009, and with the support, we received the support from the ADB as well as the FDL legal expert. Then we prepare implementing regulation. That's the sub-decree in August 2020, and the sub-decree.
ហើយជាអ៊ីនធឺណិតរបស់ខ្ញុំអត់ដើរកើតសូមមកជឿ Sorry, maybe my internet is quite slow. I cannot connect to the meeting, so I will write down on my speech and then I will send to you later. So in order to save time for the webinar, I like to close my closing remarks, opening remark for today by expressing my appreciation once again to ADB, to the EuroCham, and to the colleagues from Ministry of Commerce who organizing this very important webinar. So I hope we will have another opportunity to organize the next webinar sometime very soon. So I wish you all the best and have the fruitful deliberation. I thank you, stay safe, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And yes, unfortunately, because of the internet connection. So like mentioned, we will pass on your opening speech to the viewers after the webinars of this morning. So next on our agenda item, we will have also the first presentation on the mandatory compliance requirement under the e-commerce regulations. On this presentation, we are joined by Ms. SRENG Nearirath, the FDL legal expert, and also ADB consultant. So Ms. Nearirath, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking your time to join us today. And also thank His Excellency Sopheak and also Guillaume and also EuroCham for the opening speech. Ratana, can you move on to my slide presentation? Yeah, okay. So for the topic of today, I will present about some of the key mandatory compliance requirements under the e-commerce regulation in Cambodia. And for the key topic today, we have four. The first one is the introduction about the e-commerce in Cambodia under the regulation, available regulation now, and also some of the key compliance under the e-commerce regulations, and also what happens if you don't comply with those mandatory compliance under the e-commerce regulation. And also last but not least is the key action. What should you do after you know all about this mandatory compliance? So Ratana, can you move on? Okay, so what is e-commerce? So so in a general concept is any commercial transaction that conducts via the electronic system considered as an e-commerce. And so what is the difference between the traditional commerce and the electronic commerce? So the traditional commerce before this law has been enforced, most of the transaction, most of the business has been conducted like in real life, like everything. If you want to buy anything, you have to go to the store, or you have to do anything, you have to go to the bank, and etc. Everything has to be done in person or in real life. That those are considered as a traditional commerce. But because of the revolution of the technology, and also because of the outbreak of COVID around the world, e-commerce become the most important and also the most efficient way how to do business. And this e-commerce is not only benefit to the big company, but also benefit to the small and also SME as well. And so what are the common between the traditional commerce and e-commerce itself are that most of the existing regulation still applicable to the e-commerce. And what are special is only that there are some several of the regulation are specified or only applicable to the e-commerce, such as if you see in the slide, there would be of course law on e-commerce, sub-decree, the implementation of the law itself, and then also the broadcast about the license and also permit, and last but not least also the fee that is under the joint broadcast 315 and also 316 about the fee of the license and permit itself that the MOC just issued recently. And of course, the other one, if you want to do the business online, of course, you need to find a way how to make payment online as well. Then, of course, it's under the law on payment service provider, which is under the NBC. And another one is the broadcast on digital signature. And there's several draft law that also applicable to the e-commerce as well, but it's still under the draft. The first one is the draft law on cyber crime, and another one is the draft law on competition. Last but not least, the law on consumer protection as well. So next slide, please.
Sorry, Ms. Nearirath, we have a comment from our viewers that cannot hear you clearly. Probably you can speak a little bit louder, or probably closer to your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, I will do that. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so this is just the outline of the actual e-commerce regulations. As I mentioned earlier, that the law on e-commerce that has been passed last year, then the sub-decree that to implement the law itself, that is focusing on the classification, formality, and the procedure on how to on how the MOC will issue the permission letter and also the license itself to the intermediary and also to the electronic commerce service provider, and then also the exemption itself, and then the following by the broadcast, and then the joint broadcast. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So So I would like to give a bit brief of the introduction of the law itself before we moving to the mandatory, some of the key mandatory compliance that you must comply. So what is e-commerce? So e-commerce law has been enforced in 2019. Then the purpose of the law is govern all the activity and documents and commercial transactions that are made in the electronic form in Cambodia or cross-border. However, there's exception of some activity, including the POA. So POA cannot be done through electronic, it has to be done in real document and signatures. And also any execution related to succession, also exception as well. And of course, immovable property, any transfer when they sell or contract, and so has to be in paper as well. And any other exemption under subsidiary. Okay. Next, please. And so, what has the e-commerce law has been introduced to? So there are several points that items that the law has been introduced, such as the acceptance of the electronic commerce and make it as a valid and binding. So anything that that has been done through internet or through electronic commerce, it has to be valid and binding. That's how the principle of this law, the most important one. And then is the law also introduced about the different rule concerning the time and how you're gonna justify as a time to receive or time to sign, etc. And then the other one is the place of business of the sender. Is this all about the technology, and then the place of business of receiver, and then the validity of the electronic communications, like written or is signature required, etc. Next, please. So I think this probably also one of the most important. So who will be governed by this e-commerce? Like, so under the e-commerce law, they categorize in two types. The first one as an e-commerce service provider, the other one as an intermediary. So for the e-commerce service provider, it means that for those people who provide services or product, selling supply product or services through electronic communication or through and then the second one is well, who are the intermediary. So in short, for those who are provides the mean between the end consumer and also the service provider, usually are the intermediary. I can explain further in the next slide. So Ratana, can you move to the next slide? So for the example under the law itself, intermediary for those who are actually, for example, person who actually send the receiver or transmit, it could be cloud services, or second, of course, telecommunication. It could be smart, it could be cell card, or network services, internet service provider, search engine, and all of these categories are considered as an intermediary. So that's it. And then for move to the next slide, please. So I will move on to the general or some of the key compliance that you must comply under the e-commerce law. That if you want to, of course, you want to make your business online and you want to extend your business, but you need to consider all these steps that you need to comply as well. First of all is you need to meet the minimum information under the electronic commerce, because the law itself on this, which is very general standard around the world, where because if you buy a product in the shop, right, like you can feel, you can touch, you can see the quality, you can know the color, and you can know like, is it really something you can try it on, etc. So if you're going to shop, it's more convenient and more easier to decide. But if you buy it or you do it online, right, you cannot feel, you cannot do anything except you can see the pictures. But that is why the law comes into place, that you must have a minimum information in order for the customer or the user can make decision whether they want to purchase or they want to use it or not. So those information are including name or legal name. For example, if you are a company, your trade name and your company name are different, you need to display both, and you need to tell the client both. And then of course, if the electronic means for contact, it could be email, fax, or phone number. However, all this information the context. It has to be really easy and effective communication. For example, if the customer would like to understand or to know more the product, they send email to you or call you, but nobody pick up, then it's not efficient, doesn't consider efficient. So you have to make sure all this. And then the actual good or services to be offered. For example, if I sell this pen, right, I have to provide the detail of information of this product, like okay, this is blue pen and it's from Japan or etc. All kind of information is really important for the consumer or the user make a decision. Last but not least is the term and condition that you must have as well. And also, like in under term and condition, under your platform or under your website, you must include, of course, the cost of the good, and also and service associated with the cost of the good itself. It could be like delivery cost, it could be the tax, and it could be other costs that you might going to charge with your end user or customer. You need to display or you need to let them know. And then, of course, the method of payment. And the method of payment, you need to let your customer know as well, like whether you accept the cash on delivery or you accept the credit card or you accept any kind of the method of payment. You need to let them know as well. And then also whether you allow them to have an option to cancel the purchase after they purchase it or even terminate the whole transaction. And then if they can cancel, they can exchange. What are those rules, and also if they exchange or they can sell it, what are the procedure for refund and so forth. Okay, so next please. So the purpose of having this minimum information in the electronic commerce or under your platform, under your website, you have to make sure that all this minimum information must be sufficient in order for allow the customer to make decision whether they still want to go ahead to buy it or not. However, all this minimum information under e-commerce law does not applicable to some sector, including security and also insurance, because I believe that the separate law require differently for different product or different type of services. Okay, next please. So the following requirements are really general and in broad scope, because there's only a few clauses that talk about the consumer protection under the e-commerce itself. So because if you have your platform and you have the way of for payment transaction, right? You allow them to key in the payment information, including like credit card or any sensitive information. You must make sure that you have the reasonable safeguard in order to protect information of the customer. That's under the general requirements. And then you should not interfere in those electronic system access or try to restrict it or copy or extract all this information that you receive from the customer or from the related party without their authorization. Next, please. Last but not least, this also very common practice around, I think, elsewhere, unsolicited communication. So this is applicable whether you have business in Cambodia or outside Cambodia. If you have the mass marketing, like for example, on your phone or on your email, you always receive the marketing email, right? Like where they say, oh, you have a special promotion where you buy one, you get three or extra, or you get a special discount, etc. But under those communication or marketing way, you must have an option for the customer or end user or user to reject or not receive this anymore. You must to allow the customer to have that option. Okay, next please. So I think the last key and also the last important mandatory compliance is the licensing or permit itself, which will be introduced by the MOC and will be presented by the MOC teams. So I will not talk about that. So I will talk next is about the sanction, like what happens if you don't comply with those mandatory requirements under the regulation on the e-commerce itself. So what happened is that the Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of telecom communication or PTC could send you a written warning, like if you don't comply with all the mandatory requirements, or they also have option to cease the business activity or business transaction itself as well. And then, or they could suspensions those business, and in case that you already have the authorization or permit or license, your license could be revoked or canceled. And the other sanction could be a penalty, and then also penalty could be in prison or money fines. That's the sanction itself. Okay, now next please. So what are the key actions that you need to do after you know that how to comply with all this regulation and how to make your business or your platform to comply with the e-commerce regulation itself? So what we recommend is that the following are the recommendations that from us that we think that you need to consider. First of all, of course, you need to apply for the license. Of course, first of all, you need to apply for the mandatory license or permits. And then you should consider to review the existing policy on your platform or on your website or on your app. And that, of course, the term and condition, that probably one of the most important as well, that you need to consider whether your existing or you don't even have it, whether you need to have it in order to comply with the mandatory compliance as well. And then, of course, the content in the website or under your platform, you need to review all of that. And then also, if you have e-brochure, e-marketing, of course, you need to have the unsolicited option where you allow the user or the customer to reject future marketing or future brochure that they don't want to receive anymore. So these are the key actions that probably you want to consider when after this seminar. And if you have any further questions, probably you can ask during the question section after this. So I think this is all of my presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Nearirath, for your insightful presentation. So moving on next on our presentation, covering on the registration requirements under the e-commerce regulations. We have the honor to have His Excellency Mr. Dararith, advisor to the Ministry of Commerce and also the Directors of Business Registration Department. His Excellency will, once again, he will deliver his presentation in Khmer languages. So feel free to switch your languages below in the icon. And thank you, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Hello.
Tôi ở đâm riêng công tích.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, now you can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Before I start my presentation, I would like to thank to ADB and EuroCham that co-organized this very important event. And I would like to present my presentation in Khmer language because I already prepared my slide in Khmer language. Okay, please turn on the translation. Thank you very much. Bạnថ្ងៃនេះខ្ញុំសូមធ្វើបទបង្ហាញដែលមាននីតិកាលចំនួន7ខ្លីៗទី1ពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងច្បាប់និងលិខិតបទដ្ឋានគតិយុត្តដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងការស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតឬអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណសម្រាប់ពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងការលើកយកខ្លឹមសារសំខាន់នៃច្បាប់នេះគឺវាខាងដើមខាង consultant ADB គាត់បានលើកច្រើនហើយប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំលើកចំណុចទី3ក្នុងមាត្រាមួយចំនួនដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធផ្ទាល់ទៅនឹងការអនុញ្ញាតឲ្យក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មរៀបចំលិខិតបទដ្ឋានគតិយុត្តផ្សេងទៀតដើម្បី អនុវត្តច្បាប់នេះទាំងនោះបាទចំណុចទី2ខ្ញុំនឹងបង្ហាញខ្លីអំពីអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណឬលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតទី3គឺអំពីការស្នើសុំតើអ្នកណាអ្នកស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតហើយការបុគ្គលណាដែលស្នើសុំអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណហើយទី5ខ្ញុំនឹងនិយាយអំពីការលើកលែងផងដែរដែលអនុក្រឹត្យបានចែងអំពីការលើកលែងទី3ទី6ខ្ញុំនឹងនិយាយអំពីការស្នើសុំលិខិតបទដ្ឋានលិខិតអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណឬលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតបាទជានីតិវិធីហើយនឹងកម្រៃសេវាបាទសូមតទៅស្លាយបន្ទាប់បាទអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំសូមជម្រាបជូនដែរថាមុននឹងដល់ពេលដែលយើងធ្វើសេចក្តីជូនដំណឹងដល់បងប្អូនជាពលរដ្ឋទាំងអស់ដែលប្រកបអាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកនេះគឺយើងបានរៀបចំជាលិខិតបទដ្ឋានតិយុត្តជាលំដាប់បណ្ដោយទី1គឺមានច្បាប់មានអនុក្រឹត្យមានប្រកាសពាក់ព័ន្ធនីតិវិធីនិងប្រកាសពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹងកម្រៃសេវាសាធារណៈអញ្ចឹងលិខិតបទដ្ឋានទាំងអស់នេះហើយដែលអនុញ្ញាតឲ្យក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មធ្វើការផ្សព្វផ្សាយនិងអញ្ជើញលោកស្រីជាពាណិជ្ជករជាសហគ្រាសជាក្រុមហ៊ុនទាំងអស់ដែលបាននឹងកំពុងឬមួយមានបំណងធ្វើអាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកនេះសូមមកទទួលយកនៅលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតនិងអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណដើម្បីឲ្យដំណើរការអាជីវកម្មរបស់លោកវាស្របទៅនឹងច្បាប់បាទអញ្ចឹងទី1យើងមានច្បាប់ស្ដីពីពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកដែលប្រកាសប្រើតាមឆ្នាំ2009បន្ទាប់មកយើងមានអនុក្រឹត្យមួយស្ដីអំពីការកំណត់ប្រភេទបែបបទនិងនីតិវិធីនៃការចេញលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតហើយយើងបានចេញជាប្រកាសមួយស្ដីអំពីនីតិវិធីសម្រាប់ចេញលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតនិងអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណហើយយើងក៏ឆ្ងល់ដែរថាច្បាប់នេះបានចេញតាំងពីឆ្នាំ2019ប៉ុន្តែឥឡូវនេះយើងទើបតែប្រើប្រកាសឲ្យអាជីវករក្រុមហ៊ុននិងសហគ្រាសទាំងអស់មកស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតនិងអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណគឺយើងបានព្យាយាមធ្វើការងារច្រើនពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹង regulation ទាំងអស់នេះដើម្បីឲ្យគ្រប់ជ្រុងជ្រោយក្នុងការផ្ដល់លិខិតអនុញ្ញាតជាពិសេសគឺកម្រៃសេវានេះគឺយើងបានប្រើពេលវេលាមួយចំនួនដើម្បីថ្លឹងថ្លែងនៃការដាក់កម្រៃសេវាជាមួយនឹងក្រសួងពាក់ព័ន្ធបាទអរគុណសូមទៅស្លាយមួយទៀតបាទអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំចង់បង្ហាញអំពីច្បាប់ស្ដីអំពីពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចដែលមានមាត្រាមួយចំនួនដែលបានបង្ហាញដោយផ្ទាល់តម្រូវឲ្យក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មបាទជាអ្នកទទួលខុសត្រូវអនុវត្តច្បាប់នេះបាទហើយច្បាប់ស្ដីពីពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកនេះមានមាត្រាទី26បាទដែលតម្រូវឲ្យអន្តរការីឬបុគ្គលផ្ដល់សេវាពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចទៅធ្វើការស្នើសុំការអនុញ្ញាតពីក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មបាទអញ្ចឹងនៅការស្នើសុំមានចែកជាពីរគឺស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតសម្រាប់រូបវន្តបុគ្គលដែលប្រកបអាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកទី2គឺអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណគឺសម្រាប់ជានីតិបុគ្គលគឺជាក្រុមហ៊ុនបាទដែលមានបំណងដល់សេវាពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកបាទអញ្ចឹងគឺត្រូវសារសុំមានពីរប្រភេទបាទមានជាអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណសម្រាប់រូបវន្តបុគ្គលហើយជាលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតសម្រាប់រូបវន្តបុគ្គលនិងអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណសម្រាប់នីតិបុគ្គលបាទហើយនៅក្នុងមាត្រាច្បាប់នោះទី29ក៏បានចែងច្បាស់ដែរដែលក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មត្រូវលើកយកមកតម្រូវឲ្យមានការស្នើសុំដើម្បីគោរពតាមច្បាប់នោះគឺមាត្រាទី29ពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងព័ត៌មានអបបរមានៅក្នុងពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកនេះព័ត៌មានអបបរមានេះគឺសំដៅទៅលើការពារអ្នកប្រើប្រាស់បាទការពារអ្នកប្រើប្រាស់ក្នុងនោះគឺខ្ញុំមិនបានបំផិតនេះទេដែលមានច្រើនចំណុចដែរបាទប៉ុន្តែយើងអាចមើលឃើញនៅក្នុងច្បាប់មាត្រាទី29នេះឯងបាទហើយមាត្រាមួយទៀតដែលយើងយកអនុវត្តនៅក្នុងការចេញប្រកាសនេះគឺមាត្រា56បាទ56នេះនិយាយអំពីការផាកវិន័យ và ca phạt bên đấy cứ nè đã mình bàn sống để khất ảnh nhạt đưa ảnh nhạt bàn hay quạt bàn với quạt mặt cá tam và quạt lịch định này bạn chẳng cứ bên người ta thì hà sử mùi này hay trong trang và chạy đáy thì thay trước nơi miền kịch ca mà dùng đơn tiết là trời tôi chỉ ca đáy cứ bẹ con người ta thì hay là trong stop đây thì cam tam và quạt lịch định chẳng người ta hay với cứ tầm đời oi của xuông phi khám từ của xuông về cám nâng cái xuông presided tụ cạn để cúng nâng điệp trong chia crom sort thò muối và sầm rập ao nèประกอบชีวกรรมตามความละเอียดtớiกรุบตามvàกรุบตามmà crom sort thò nó về nâng điệp trong chiaประกาศรูปvà hai là viên cái số các con sinh sẽ ai cho room trong này bạn chẳng ở quay đây trong trong chạy chui mình phần đắng là các con là tập quay trong lịch và xong to tới slide một tiết và ở lấy xong ăn nhát cho tao ăn rất thành công chẳng nó không ai khởi này đòi nó không chịu bám đây vì cam tam quan là nick ban chạy tha ở cái số Việt Nam nâng số các quán việc chóm chi ăn khởi mỗi năm bay phí cầm bạc phí tỷ thí bài bot bài sao dùng rơi chuyện đó phải nâng ca lược lên và cho nên không ai khởi này bên người ta tỷ 4 cứ ban và chạy bát than của số cám chia hạ bàn với tôi cả nghĩa là mình mặt cách trong cả cực đốm đó là khởi ảnh nhạt đưa ở nhà bàn đó anh ta cà rây nâng một cơ đo xe va lịch cam tam của toàn lịch nâng địa bắt ở tôi score thành độc chất lịch cam tam của toàn lịch chân dương khơi mà không được nhưng khơi nhân mấy một tiệt lương phí thì khởi ảnh nhạt nâng ở nhà bàn đời ra thái âm phí thì như ban bắt từ tôi score thành độc chất lịch cam tam của toàn lịch chắc là mình đang chia mệnh điện thủ vi tê và con tái chia vậy mỗi đá ai chùm đôi ao ca thừa chỉ cam tam còn là lịch bọc tôi của một cơ được trong hồn nốt vì ai bên ca của chạy phụ và chẳng nơi của team mà chỉ muốn có cái miền này cái tha còn ai nào xong rồi smart chặt tên với quạt chọn bán cái quạt nào xong rồi sùng cám nên mà chạy chun và chạy chun một chất là bởi ai quạt nữa ở miền tây thì chốn miền ca chưa tục chất can được kháng này lơ chia siêu bài cái lịch lịch vào quạt năng mà đôi chỉ miền website vào quạt đôi chỉ miền platform vào quạt năng ai chắc là đây kia ca smart chặt tên lơ pi mandatory đại miền piคือkhách ảnh nhát năng nhạc bản hay chấm phu miền tra ti là mua đồng ti làm phần đi nếu không ạ cái này cứ sủng đại làm ti bài bot bài cả sạt tầm rơi ti sự phù hợp tiếp ca mà tôi phù hợp tiếp ca cái prai quần biên lại khăn hoặc ca ti khách ảnh nhát ở đây cứ dương miền chia và ca chị ấy và to và tuồng và này nó không được lạ sạn ở đây là dương một công tài chặt đạo đấy cứ dương mình toàn bán chuyên từ đó thưa ca vì ca cái prai vì ca ti là lại ti chân và ca vì ca cái prai ca ti ấy cứ dương nâng tranh chỉ một to một tuồng lấy cứ dương tranh chỉ một ca mỗi lần mà đó là khách nhát ở gặp chỉ cam sấn hay nâng ở nhà bản hay biệt tra ti và muối không ăn được kết cầm lót ở ti cái tập cách này là khăn trong ca na xong thật nhạt chẳng là nó cứ dương được xe là không cả được ắt thành tiệt tha tập cách là na thể sống bên lá hay là khăn ca na xong mình sẽ làm thật nhạt hay cái tập cách bỏ cô hết na đà trở xa xong chỉ ở nhà bán và hay là khăn ca na xong mình sẽ làm hay người ta ti pramสำคัญនៅក្នុងអនុក្រឹត្យហ្នឹងគឺនិយាយពីការលើកលែងចាប់ដកបាទចឹងការលើកលែងនៅខ្ញុំនឹងនិយាយលម្អិតបន្ថែមនៅក្នុងប្រកាសរបស់ក្រសួងទៀតយើងចូលដល់ប្រកាសក្រសួងយើងនឹងបន្ថែមបាទសូមបន្តទៅ slide មួយទៀត Hello បាទ Hello បាទលឺទេបាទបាទសូមអញ្ជើញបាទបើសិនជាស្ដាប់ ខ្ញុំមិនទាន់ឬមិនសូវលឺបែបសូមជួយដំណឹងមកខ្ញុំផងបាទជាបន្តនេះបាទខ្ញុំសូមអនុញ្ញាតបង្ហាញអំពីខ្លឹមសារសំខាន់នៃលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតឬអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកបាទអញ្ចឹងគឺចំណុចទី1និយាយអំពីលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតប្រកបអាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកការអនុញ្ញាតនេះនឹងផ្ដល់សម្រាប់តែរូបវន្តបុគ្គលឬសហគ្រាសបាទអញ្ចឹងយើងផ្ដល់ឲ្យតែរូបវន្តបុគ្គលឬសហគ្រាសទេដែលប្រកបអាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកហ្នឹងនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជានិងរូបវន្តបុគ្គលឬសហគ្រាសដែលប្រើប្រាស់បណ្ដាញសង្គមបាទឬតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកជាមធ្យោបាយក្នុងការផ្គត់ផ្គង់ទំនិញលក់ទំនិញនិងសេវាបាទអញ្ចឹងសូមបញ្ជាក់ថាយើងមានពាក្យពីរសំខាន់ទី1គឺរូបវន្តបុគ្គលទី2គឺសហគ្រាសអញ្ចឹងពីរហ្នឹងមានលក្ខខណ្ឌខុសគ្នាបន្តិចបាទចំពោះរូបវន្តបុគ្គលយើងសំដៅទៅលើបុគ្គលជាអាជីវករតែគាត់សប្តាហ៍ថ្ងៃនេះគឺគាត់ចង់ធ្វើអាជីវកម្មគឺគាត់ត្រូវតែសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតប្រកបអាជីវកម្មគាត់នៅច្រកចេញចូលតែមួយរបស់រាជធានីខេត្តឥឡូវនេះគឺយើងធ្វើបដិភូកម្មទៅដល់ខណ្ឌទៅហើយបាទដល់ខណ្ឌគឺគាត់សុំតែខណ្ឌទេបាទហើយសហគ្រាសបុគ្គលគឺសំដៅអាជីវករដែលគាត់ចុះបញ្ជីពាណិជ្ជកម្មនៅក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មបាទចុះជាបញ្ជីពាណិជ្ជកម្មតែម្ដងបាទអញ្ចឹងវាខុសគ្នាបន្តិចហ្នឹងទេបាទជារូបវន្តបុគ្គលម្ចាស់ជារូបវន្តបុគ្គលដូចគ្នាហ្នឹងគឺមួយគឺទៅសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតនៅច្រកចេញចូលតែមួយក្រោមការគ្រប់គ្រងរបស់រាជធានីខេត្តហើយមួយទៀតគឺសហគ្រាសដែលសូមចុះបញ្ជីពាណិជ្ជកម្មនៅក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មបាទចំណុចទី2ពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណសម្រាប់ប្រតិបត្តិការផ្ដល់សេវាពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកគឺផ្ដល់ទៅដល់នីតិបុគ្គលនិយាយចំគឺក្រុមហ៊ុនតែម្ដងបាទនីតិបុគ្គលនិងសាខាក្រុមហ៊ុនបរទេសដែលធ្វើប្រតិបត្តិការនិងសកម្មភាពពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកបាទអញ្ចឹងពីរនេះគឺมันអាចស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតបានទេគឺតម្រូវឲ្យគាត់ស្នើសុំជាអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណបាទជាអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណបាទអញ្ចឹងក្រុមហ៊ុនបរទេសគាត់អាចប្រើក្រុមហ៊ុនគាត់ផ្ទាល់មកចុះជាសាខាដោយច្បាប់សហគ្រាសគឺអនុញ្ញាតឲ្យក្រុមហ៊ុនបរទេសអាចធ្វើសកម្មភាពអាជីវកម្មនៅក្នុងប្រទេសអាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាបានដោយបង្កើតជាសាខាឬការឡែកអំណាចតែការឡែកអំណាចគាត់អាចធ្វើសកម្មភាពលក់អីបានទេអញ្ចឹងមានតែបង្កើតជាសាខាទេដែលអាចធ្វើសកម្មភាពលក់ដូរឲ្យបានដូចក្រុមហ៊ុនដើមរបស់គាត់បាទអញ្ចឹងគាត់មកគាត់អត់ត្រូវបង្កើតជានីតិបុគ្គលថ្មីទេគាត់ចុះជាសាខាតែម្ដងបាទនីតិបុគ្គលរបស់គាត់គឺនីតិបុគ្គលដែលបង្កើតនៅច្បាប់បរទេសដដែលអញ្ចឹងគាត់អាចធ្វើបានបាទអញ្ចឹងយើងនឹងផ្ដល់ជូនទៅសាខាក្រុមហ៊ុនបរទេសដែរសម្រាប់អាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណអញ្ចឹងប្រភេទអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណខាងនោះមានដូចខាងក្រោមទី1គឺក្រុមហ៊ុនឬក្រុមហ៊ុនសាខាបរទេសសាខាក្នុងបរទេសនេះដែលធ្វើសេវាគេហទំព័រពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកបាទជាសេវាថ្នាលពាណិជ្ជកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកសេវាទីផ្សារអនឡាញសេវាគេហទំព័រដេញថ្លៃអនឡាញហើយខាងក្រោមយើងមើលឃើញបានបាទនិងសេវាផ្សេងទៀតដែលផ្ដល់តាមរយៈកម្មវិធីកុំព្យូទ័រឬឧបករណ៍វៃឆ្លាតសម្រាប់ការជំរុញធ្វើអាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចបាទអញ្ចឹងគឺសកម្មភាពដែលគាត់ធ្វើមាន 4-5 ចំណុចនេះគឺគាត់ត្រូវតែមកសុំអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណពីក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មមុននឹងដំណើរការធ្វើអាជីវកម្មបាទសូមបន្តទៅទៀតសូមចូលទៅ slide មួយទៀតបាទចំពោះរូបវន្តបុគ្គលដែលស្នើសុំតើគាត់មានឯកសារឬលក្ខខណ្ឌតម្រូវខ្លះដែលគាត់ត្រូវស្នើសុំមកក្រសួងកម្មភ្ជាប់ជាមួយមកស្នើសុំអញ្ចឹងចំពោះការស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតជារូបវន្តបុគ្គលឬសហគ្រាសហ្នឹងមានលក្ខណៈខុសគ្នាបន្តិចទេរូបវន្តបុគ្គលហើយនិងសហគ្រាសការតម្រូវអញ្ចឹងចំពោះរូបវន្តបុគ្គលគឺគាត់ត្រូវភ្ជាប់មកជាមួយមើលលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតប្រកបអាជីវកម្មចេញដោយអង្គភាព ច្រកចេញចូលតែមួយភេទជារូបវន្តបុគ្គលនេះគឺសម្ដៅអាជីវករតែគាត់ស្ថិតនៅក្រោមការគ្រប់គ្រងនៃច្រកចេញចូលទីមួយលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតអញ្ចឹងគឺគាត់បើស្នើសុំគាត់ត្រូវតែភ្ជាប់លិខិតអនុញ្ញាតប្រកបអាជីវកម្មដែលចេញចូលដែលអនុញ្ញាតដោយច្រកចេញចូលតែមួយមកហើយទី2គឺគាត់ជាប់បានបតង់អញ្ចឹងបានបតង់ក្នុងនេះយើងដាក់ប្រសិនបើមានហ្នឹងបានន័យថាចំពោះអាជីវករខ្លះគាត់មានអាជីវកម្មហើយទៅហើយបាទគាត់មានបង្កើតជាអាជីវកម្មហើយអញ្ចឹងគាត់មានបតង់ហើយអញ្ចឹងគាត់អាចដាក់មកបានតែចំពោះអាជីវករថ្មីតែគាត់ទៅបង្កើតគាត់ទៅចង់ធ្វើអាជីវកម្មតាមព័ត៌មានអញ្ចឹងគាត់អត់ទាន់មានបតង់ទេបាទគាត់អត់ទាន់មានបតង់ឡើយទេគាត់គ្រាន់តែសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតពីខាងច្រកឲ្យភ្លាមគឺគាត់យកមកសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតប្រកបអាជីវកម្មតាមព័ត៌មានអញ្ចឹងយើងអត់ទាមទារដោយមានបតង់ទេហើយទី2គឺគាត់ត្រូវភ្ជាប់ជាមួយនឹងអត្តសញ្ញាណប័ណ្ណដែលមានសុពលភាពណារបស់បុគ្គលស្នើសុំឯងហើយភ្ជាប់រូបថត 4x6 របស់រូបបុគ្គលហើយថតចំពីមុខហើយចឹងទៅហើយរូបថតត្រូវថ្មីមិនឲ្យលើពី3ខែបាទមុនដែលគាត់ស្នើសុំហើយចំណុចសំខាន់មួយនេះគឺគាត់ត្រូវមានករណីនៅគ្រឹះស្ថានហិរញ្ញវត្ថុណាមួយបាទដើម្បីធានានឹងការទូទាត់នៅពេលដែលគាត់ធ្វើបប្រតិបត្តិការអាជីវកម្មតាមអេឡិចត្រូនិកនេះឯងហើយអ្វីដែលសំខាន់មួយដែរនោះគឺឯកសារគំរូអាជីវកម្មហើយយើងត្រូវការហើយពិនិត្យមើលទម្រង់របស់អាជីវកម្មគាត់ហ្នឹងតើគាត់ធ្វើរបៀបម៉េចបាទអញ្ចឹងអ្វីដែលសំខាន់គឺយើងចង់ដឹងទម្រង់របស់គាត់តើគាត់លក់ហ្នឹងគឺគាត់លក់ជាលក់ដុំលក់រាយបាទដូច model របស់វាអាចជា B2B B2C ហើយជាដើមហ្នឹងគឺគាត់ត្រូវតែបង្ហាញខ្លីៗមកបាទហើយអ្វីដែលសំខាន់ជាងទៀតគឺយើងពិនិត្យមើលថាតើគាត់អាចចូលទៅក្នុងការហាមឃាត់ដោយច្បាប់ជាពិសេសច្បាប់ការពារអ្នកប្រើប្រាស់នោះគឺពាក់ព័ន្ធpyramid scheme នោះដែលយើងហាមឃាត់មិនឲ្យគាត់ធ្វើគណៈការបែងចែកជាទម្រង់ pyramid scheme នោះឯងបាទហើយបន្តមកទៀតគឺវិញ្ញាបនបត្រអនឡាញនិងឈ្មោះដែនពីក្រសួងប្រៃសណីយ៍គូចាក់គុំដល់សិនបើមានបាទអញ្ចឹងក្នុងចំពោះរូបវន្តបុគ្គលអាចមានអត់បាទអាចមានអត់បាទហើយបុគ្គលស្នើសុំត្រូវបំពេញពាក្យស្នើសុំអញ្ចឹងពាក្យស្នើសុំនោះគាត់អាចបំពេញជា hard copy ឬមួយក៏អាចធ្វើជា electronic បានឥឡូវនេះយើងសូមឆ្លៀតឱកាសនិយាយកន្លែងនេះបន្តិចថានេះវាតាមពិតអនឡាញវាត្រូវថាស្នើសុំក៏ត្រូវអនឡាញដែរបានត្រឹមត្រូវបាទប៉ុន្តែដោយពេលវេលាវាមិនអនុគ្រោះឲ្យធ្វើទាន់ពេលវេលាអញ្ចឹងក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មសូមការអធិស្ឋានថាយើងនៅធ្វើដោយដៃសិនបែរថាយើងទទួលពាក្យដោយដៃហើយនឹងចេញជាលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតជា hard copy ដែរបាទហើយប៉ុន្តែយើងកំពុងតែច្នៃប្រឌិតជា website មួយតែអាចឲ្យអ្នកស្នើសុំនេះគឺបំពេញពាក្យស្នើសុំតាមអនឡាញបាទហើយគាត់ដាក់មកតាមអនឡាញយើងពិនិត្យហើយយើងឆ្លើយឆ្លងតាម mail ធម្មតាបាទនៅពេលដែលយើងពិនិត្យថាគ្រប់គ្រាន់ហើយគឺយើងទទួលយកតាមនឹងឯងហើយយើងនឹងចេញលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតជាក្រោយយើងដំណាក់កាលទី1បានត្រឹមប៉ុណ្្នឹងសិនទេបាទហើយយើងនឹងធ្វើការអភិវឌ្ឍប្រព័ន្ធផ្សាយវត្តកម្មមួយហើយមិនយូរទេព្រោះអីក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មមានបទពិសោធន៍គ្រប់គ្រាន់ក្នុងការធ្វើប្រព័ន្ធផ្សាយវត្តកម្មនេះជាពិសេសខាងយុវដ្ឋានចុះបញ្ជីនេះបានមានបទពិសោធន៍ហើយកំពុងអនុវត្តការតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកនេះបាទដែលចំទៅគឺដូចជាមុនគេផងនៅក្នុងជួររដ្ឋាភិបាលដែលយើងប្រើប្រាស់ប្រព័ន្ធស្វ័យប្រវត្តិកម្មនេះជាលក្ខណៈពេញលេញតាំងពីការដាក់ពាក្យស្នើសុំការពិនិត្យឯកសារការផ្ដល់វិញ្ញាបនបត្រការបង់ប្រាក់អីទាំងអស់គឺតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកទាំងអស់អញ្ចឹងយើងនឹងរៀបចំដូចគ្នានឹងអត់ខុសគ្នាទេធ្វើយ៉ាងដែរហើយប្រហែលជាយើងដាក់នៅក្នុង KMDX ដែរ KMDX ដោយសពថ្ងៃនេះគឺយើងដាក់នៅ KMDX អញ្ចឹងយើងចូលទៅចុះបញ្ជីជាសហគ្រាសជាអីហើយយើងអាចភ្ជាប់ទៅស្នើសុំការអនុញ្ញាតប្រកបអាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកបានរួមគ្នាតែម្ដងបាទអញ្ចឹងសូមបញ្ជាក់ជូនប៉ុណ្ណឹង ប៉ុន្តែយើងត្រូវការពេលវេលាបន្តិចហើយជាពិសេសគឺថវិកាផងដែរដោយសារឥឡូវនេះគឺកូវីដចឹងផងក៏យើងត្រូវការថវិកាហ្នឹងក៏ច្រើនណាស់បាទសូមបន្តទៅ slide មួយទៀតចឹងការស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតនេះគឺយើងមានសុពលភាពគឺ2ឆ្នាំបាទ2ឆ្នាំគិតចាប់តាមពីថ្ងៃផ្ដល់លិខិតអនុញ្ញាតបាទហើយរយៈពេលដល់សេវាសម្រាប់លិខិតអនុញ្ញាតនេះយើងប្រើពេល3ទៅ5ថ្ងៃបាទនេះគឺជារយៈពេលផ្លូវការដែលខាងក្រសួងសេដ្ឋកិច្ចនិងហិរញ្ញវត្ថុដូចជាខាង ACU ផងដែរបានចែកគ្នាមុននឹងចេញប្រកាសរួមបាទអញ្ចឹងយើងបានយកពិនិត្យទៅលើការពិនិត្យកិច្ចការពិនិត្យតើពេលវេលាដើម្បីពិនិត្យហ្នឹងគឺអាចពី3ថ្ងៃទៅ5ថ្ងៃបាទបាទអញ្ចឹងអ្វីសម្រាប់ការស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតគឺមានប៉ុណ្ណឹងហើយអាចមើលបន្ថែមនៅក្នុងប្រកាសអញ្ចឹងសូមចូលបន្តទៅក្នុងការផ្ដល់ជាអាជ្ញាបានម្ដងបាទអញ្ចឹងជាសង្ខេបអ្វីគឺខ្លីៗមិនដូចមុនយើងបានរៀបរាប់អស់ហើយចំពោះក្រុមហ៊ុនត្រូវសុំអាជ្ញាបានបាទអញ្ចឹងអាជ្ញាបានគឺនេះជាសហគ្រាសបុគ្គលទេបាទសំទោសអញ្ចឹងសហគ្រាសបុគ្គលខុសពីរូបវន្តបុគ្គលបន្តិចទេគ្រាន់ថាគាត់យកវិញ្ញាបនបត្រចុះបញ្ជីពាណិជ្ជកម្មហើយរូបវន្តបុគ្គលមុនជាពាណិជ្ជករគឺគាត់យកលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតពីច្រកចេញចូលតែមួយហើយចំពោះសហគ្រាសបុគ្គលគឺគាត់ខុសតែមួយហ្នឹងទេគឺខុសតែផ្ដល់វិញ្ញាបនបត្រចុះបញ្ជីពាណិជ្ជកម្មបាទក្រៅពីនេះដូចគ្នាអស់បាទអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំមិនបាច់បញ្យល់សារឡើងវិញទេបាទសូមអរគុណសូមឲ្យតទៅ slide មួយទៀតសូមតមួយទៀតបាទដូចគ្នាទេបាទសូមទៅ slide មួយទៀតបាទអញ្ចឹងសូមចូលទៅដល់ដល់ថតក្រោយមួយ slide វិញបាទអរគុណអញ្ចឹងនេះជាតម្រូវសម្រាប់ការតម្រូវសម្រាប់ក្រុមហ៊ុនដែលត្រូវស្នើសុំអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណអញ្ចឹងអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណនេះគឺត្រូវស្នើសុំមានភ្ជាប់មកវិញ្ញាបនបត្រចុះបញ្ជីហើយវិញ្ញាបនបត្រចុះបញ្ជីរបស់គាត់ហ្នឹងគឺនៅក្នុងលក្ខន្តិកៈរបស់គាត់អាចខាតទៅតែមានកម្មវត្ថុមួយសម្រាប់អាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកបាទអញ្ចឹងបើសិនជាលក្ខន្តិកៈរបស់គាត់នឹងដែលបានបង្កើតហើយអត់ទាន់មានទេគាត់ត្រូវតែកែលក្ខន្តិកៈរបស់គាត់ហ្នឹងដើម្បីបន្ថែមកម្មវត្ថុដែលមានកម្មវត្ថុពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងការធ្វើអាជីវកម្មតាមប្រព័ន្ធអេឡិចត្រូនិកបាទនឹងសូមបញ្ជាក់ជូនទី1អញ្ចឹងបើក្រុមហ៊ុនបង្កើតថ្មីគឺគាត់ត្រូវដាក់កម្មវត្ថុអាជីវកម្មទៅហើយតែក្រុមហ៊ុនដែលមានហើយស្រាប់គាត់ចង់ធ្វើគាត់ស្នើសុំអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណគាត់ត្រូវមើលក្នុងលក្ខន្តិកៈរបស់គាត់នឹងថាតើមានកម្មវត្ថុនឹងឬនៅបើមិនទាន់មានទេហើយតម្រូវឲ្យគាត់កែលក្ខន្តិកៈដោយបញ្ចូលថែមនៅកម្មវត្ថុអាជីវកម្មនេះសិនបានគាត់ដាក់ស្នើសុំមកសូមអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណបានហើយចំណុចទី2គឺបតង់បាទបតង់អញ្ចឹងបតង់នេះយើងអត់បានដាក់ប្រសិនបើមានទេព្រោះអីដោយសារឥឡូវនេះយើងធ្វើនៅក្នុងដំណាក់កាល KMDX នេះគឺយើងធ្វើគេហៅ single នេះហើយ single window បានថាចូលទៅដល់គឺបានទាំងបតង់បានទាំងវិញ្ញាបនបត្រចុះបញ្ជីអញ្ចឹងគាត់មានឲ្យស្រាច់ហើយបាទអញ្ចឹងកាលណាគាត់បង្កើតក្រុមហ៊ុនគឺគាត់ត្រូវតែមានអាហ្នឹងហើយអញ្ចឹងគាត់យកមកត្រូវភ្ជាប់ជាមួយគ្នាហើយក្រុមហ៊ុនដែលមានស្រាប់នោះក៏គាត់ត្រូវតែមានបតង់ដែរបាទអញ្ចឹងទាមទារឲ្យមានបតង់តែម្ដងហើយវិញ្ញាបនបត្រអនឡាញបាទវិញ្ញាបនបត្រអនឡាញគឺគាត់ត្រូវតែមានពីក្រសួងប្រៃសណីយ៍ហើយឯកសារមធ្យោបាយទាក់ទងនឹងការទូទាត់ដែលទទួលស្គាល់ដោយធនាគារជាតិបាទអញ្ចឹងគាត់ត្រូវបញ្ជាក់ថាគាត់មធ្យោបាយទូទាត់គាត់ហ្នឹងដែលរបៀបណាប៉ុន្តែមធ្យោបាយទូទាត់នេះត្រូវមានការទទួលស្គាល់ពីធនាគារជាតិតែគាត់គ្រប់គ្រងទៅលើ e-payment នេះឯងបាទហើយមួយទៀតឯកសារតម្រូវសំខាន់គឺ business model ដូចគ្នាបាទប៉ុន្តែវាជាងលម្អិតបន្តិចហើយព្រោះឲ្យជាក្រុមហ៊ុនបាទអញ្ចឹងយើងស្នើសុំឲ្យគាត់មាន business model ដាក់មកភ្ជាប់មកជាមួយដែរសូមបន្តទៅ slide មួយទៀតបាទអញ្ចឹងហើយលើសពីរូបវន្តបុគ្គលនិងសហគ្រាសបុគ្គលគឺគាត់ត្រូវភ្ជាប់មកនៅកិច្ចសន្យាគំរូកិច្ចសន្យារវាងអន្តរការីនិងបុគ្គលដែលផ្ដល់សេវាពាណិជ្ជកម្មអំពីការតម្រូវព័ត៌មានបមាអានេះសម្រាប់ដែលអ្នកស្នើសុំអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណធ្វើជាអន្តរការីអញ្ចឹង នៅក្នុងនេះគឺក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មនៅក្នុងប្រកាសគឺតម្រូវឲ្យគាត់មានគំរូកិច្ចសន្យាមួយនៃគំរូកិច្ចសន្យានេះគឺគាត់ត្រូវមានលក្ខខណ្ឌមួយចំនួនដើម្បីឲ្យគាត់ធ្វើកិច្ចសន្យាជាមួយអ្នកដែលស្នើសុំនៅចូលទៅលក់នៅក្នុង platform របស់គាត់អញ្ចឹងក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មតម្រូវឲ្យគាត់មានគំរូកិច្ចសន្យាហើយគំរូកិច្ចសន្យាត្រូវមានព័ត៌មានអបបមាដើម្បីធានាបាននៅការតម្រូវដោយច្បាប់នៅក្នុងមាត្រាទី29បានការ29ពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងព័ត៌មានអបបមាសម្រាប់ធានាការពៀនអ្នកប្រើប្រាស់បាទអញ្ចឹងគាត់មានចំណុចតាំងប្រមាណនៃច្បាប់កំណត់នេះគាត់ត្រូវតែបញ្ចូលក្នុងកិច្ចសន្យារបស់គាត់បាទអញ្ចឹងគឺសូមមើលគំរូសិនបាទហើយបន្តមកទៀតគឺអ្នកស្នើសុំទៅបំពេញបែបបទនៅក្នុងតារាងពាក្យស្នើសុំដោយតែបុគ្គលស្នើសុំធម្មតាដែរបាទហើយអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណហ្នឹងគឺមានសុពលភាពលើសពីលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតគឺអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណមានសុពលភាពរហូតដល់3ឆ្នាំបាទ13ឆ្នាំហើយរយៈពេលដល់សេវាសម្រាប់ឲ្យអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណគឺមានរយៈពេលយូរជាងលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតគឺយើងសូមពេលរហូតដល់10ថ្ងៃនៃថ្ងៃធ្វើការបាទព្រោះមានលក្ខណៈស្មុគស្មាញយើងត្រូវពិនិត្យឯកសារច្រើនឯកសារតម្រូវច្រើនហើយពិនិត្យជាពិសេសទៅលើគំរូកិច្ចសន្យារបស់គាត់ទៅលើ business model របស់គាត់លម្អិតបាទអញ្ចឹងយើងត្រូវការប្រើពេលវេលាយូរបន្តិចទើបអាចធ្វើការសម្រេចបានបាទអញ្ចឹងក៏ដូចគ្នាដែររបៀបស្នើសុំអីគឺយើងធ្វើដូចគ្នាអស់នៅក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មបាទសូមបន្តទៅស្លាយមួយទៀតនេះគឺចំពោះការលើកលែងបាទអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងប្រកាសយើងនេះក៏មាននិយាយពីការលើកលែងដែរការលើកលែងគឺមានកំណត់ក្នុងច្បាប់ហើយប៉ុន្តែយើងយកមកបញ្ជាក់ច្បាស់លាស់ចំពោះការលើកលែងឲ្យខាងជាពិសេសអាជីវករតូចតាចរបស់យើងនេះគាត់ដឹងថាអ្វីដែលគាត់អាចលើកលែងគាត់ពីកាតព្វកិច្ចរបស់គាត់ឲ្យត្រូវស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតបាទអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងនេះគឺជាមានការលើកលែងចំនួន4ចំណុចសំខាន់ទី1គឺគាត់ធ្វើអាជីពគាត់ធ្វើបទបត្តិការតាមលិខិតនេះប៉ុន្តែគាត់នឹងផ្សព្វផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មអំពីទំនិញសេវារបស់គាត់ទេបាទអញ្ចឹងយើងអត់តម្រូវឲ្យគាត់ហ្នឹងមកសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតទេបាទប្រភេទធ្វើផ្សាយពាណិជ្ជកម្មបាទហើយការបំរុងទុកសេវាដែលមិនមានការកក់ប្រាក់ដូចថាគ្រាន់តែគាត់ booking ឯធម្មតាអីហ្នឹងគឺអាហ្នឹងក៏យើងអត់មាននៅទាមទារឲ្យគាត់មកសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតឬអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណទេបាទហើយការលក់ដែរប៉ុន្តែលក់របៀបតូចបាទចំណុចទី3នេះគឺការលក់ទំនិញសេវារបស់រូបវន្តបុគ្គលឬសហគ្រាសបាទអានេះមិនមែនជាក្រុមហ៊ុនទេណាសម្រាប់រូបវន្តបុគ្គលឬសហគ្រាសដែលមានផលរបរជាប់ពន្ធតូចនេះគឺយើងក៏លើកលែងដែរអាទូចបាទទូចគាត់លក់ទូចបំផុតបាទហើយការលក់ទំនិញសេវាដែលមានលក្ខណៈគ្រួសារឬតាមរដូវបាទអញ្ចឹងអានេះក៏យើងលើកលែងដែរបាទឧទាហរណ៍ថាគាត់ជាងចម្លាក់គាត់ឆ្លាក់ឈើជាចម្លាក់អញ្ចឹងណាហើយចម្លាក់គាត់មួយគាត់អាចឆ្លាក់នឹងដោយស្នាដៃគាត់ផ្ទាល់អត់មានបុគ្គលិកអត់មានកម្មករផ្សេងទេជាលក្ខណៈគ្រួសាររបស់គាត់ឆ្លាក់នឹងជាផ្ទាំងគំនូជាគូអីក៏ដោយបាទអញ្ចឹងគាត់អាចធ្វើបានគាត់អាចលក់អនឡាញបានដែរបាទហ្នឹងក៏យើងឲ្យគាត់លក់ទៅយើងអត់ឲ្យគាត់សុំអីទេបាទហើយប្រភេទតាមរដូវកាលជាការប្រមូលផលដូចជាគាត់លក់ស្វាយទរេននេះមួយរដូវមានម្ដងអញ្ចឹងសម្រាប់គ្រួសារទៅការគ្រួសារគាត់អាចលក់អញ្ចឹងបានយើងក៏មានការលើកលែងច្បាប់ការលើកលែងដែរបាទអានេះគឺសម្រាប់ការលើកលែងមានប៉ុណ្ណឹង
សំទោសអាដាមយើងនៅសល់ប្រហែលជា2នាទីទៀត
បាទឥឡូវចូលដល់បញ្ចប់ដែរហើយបាទអរគុណសូមបញ្ចប់ចូលទៅដល់ខាងស្លាយបន្តទៀតមកបាទនេះការលើកលែងដែរយើងអាចអានបន្តតាមនឹងបានបាទវាមានការអីយើងអាចពិភាក្សាគ្នានៅពេលយើងមានសំណួរបាទអញ្ចឹងបន្តទៅមួយទៀតមកសូមបន្តទៀតបាទនីតិវិធីស្នើសុំខ្ញុំបាននិយាយខ្លះហើយពីខាងដើមអញ្ចឹងការស្នើសុំគឺបុគ្គលអាចស្នើសុំបានហើយទាំងពាក្យស្នើសុំនេះគឺយើងមានដាក់នៅក្នុង upload នៅក្នុង website businessregistration.moc.gov.kh អញ្ចឹងគាត់អាចចូលក្នុង website ហ្នឹងទៅហើយយើងមាន upload ក្នុងនោះដោយសារយើងមិនទាន់ អភិវឌ្ឍតម្លៃនៅសម្រាប់ e-commerce បាទចឹងនេះគ្រាន់តែជាព័ត៌មានសម្រាប់ឲ្យគាត់ដឹងទេថាគាត់ស្នើសុំទៅតាមណាបាទសូមអញ្ជើញតទៀតសិនបាទអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំចង់បញ្ជាក់ចុងក្រោយនេះគឺអំពីកម្រៃសេវារបស់គាត់កម្រៃសេវាគឺសម្រាប់លិខិតអនុញ្ញាតយើងចែកទៅពីរលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតសម្រាប់រូបវ័នបុគ្គលមាន200,000 រៀលហើយលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតសម្រាប់សហគ្រាសបុគ្គលមាន400,000ហើយអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណមាន1 លានរៀលបាទមានតែ3មុខទេបាទសូមបន្តទៀតបាទអញ្ចឹងហើយដោយសារពេលវេលាយើងមានកំណត់យើងបានបញ្ចប់តាមពេលវេលាដោយសង្ខេបបាទអញ្ចឹងបើសិនជាមានចន្លោះណាដែលមើលទៅក្នុង slide ហើយអត់ទាន់យល់អាចនៅពេលយើងមានលើកសំណួរយើងអាចសួរបានបាទសូមអរគុណបាទ
សូមអរគុណអាដាមសម្រាប់បទបង្ហាញ So thank you, Your Excellency, for your insightful presentation. So to continue, next we have on the agenda, we'll now hear on the view on e-commerce from our private sector's perspective. So we have Mr. Chris McCARTHY, CEO at Mango Tango Asia. He will deliver his presentation. So Chris, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I have been involved in this project several years. Engaged in is that from me? Okay.
No, it is.
So I have been involved in this project for several years, engaged with the Asian Development Bank from the private sector perspective. Myself, I have been working in e-commerce and online sales for more than 25 years. In fact, I worked on the creation of some of the very first websites for companies like IBM, Ford, and MasterCard. So I have a long perspective on digital policy and legislation in that respect. So I will talk to you today about the history of private sector engagement on this particular project. And then I will talk about some of the concerns that we have frequently heard, what we hear from the private sector regarding the future of online business and e-commerce activity here in the kingdom. Okay, so next slide, please. So this actually original support came in 2017 by ADB and the Mekong Business Initiative Project, and then with assistance to gather private sector input from the British Chamber of Commerce, the private sector open e-business working group, and also from the European Chamber of Commerce. Over the last few years, there have been quite a few meetings and engagements with the royal government, including the Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Economy and Finance, Ministry and Posts and Telecommunications, on barriers and opportunities for e-commerce, to understand the planning and legislation with respect to e-commerce, and to provide input from the private sector. And the focus by the private sector has been on ensuring that the legislation and regulations are best practices with respect to global learners here, basically to ensure that Cambodia can have a strong e-commerce future. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thanks. Actually, this was a report that is available. It was sponsored by Asian Development Bank, Australia Aid, and their Mekong Business Initiative from ADB. And it reviewed established frameworks globally for evaluation of national conditions for e-commerce success through a private sector lens, including technical and operational factors, which has to do with infrastructure, socioeconomic and cultural factors, which has to do with digital literacy and openness to e-commerce, and then of course legal and governmental factors for e-commerce, which is a lot of what we've heard today. Next slide, please. And it's interesting actually to look at what the difference is between 2017 and today, and what some of the benefits were. In fact, what we heard a lot was that the lack of an e-commerce framework in 2017 actually kept out a lot of the global competitors. Amazon told us directly that they would not operate here because there was no e-commerce law. But that actually allowed a Cambodian e-commerce industry to grow without that kind of intense foreign competition. So a nascent industry or early industry was able to grow without being shut out by the likes of Alibaba or Amazon. That is changing today as international competitors are coming in. Another insight that we found from looking globally at e-commerce is that developing markets tended to move ahead much more quickly with e-commerce, logistics and cashless payments because of a lack of legacy systems. So new systems could be designed that were lightweight and with modern infrastructure technology. So that would give developing markets more of a chance to move ahead quickly. The other thing we found was that even in 2017, there was already sufficient infrastructure for e-commerce in Cambodia. Cheap data, a lot of competition in telecoms and ISPs. And we found also in 2017 that Cambodia already had a vibrant ecosystem of micro entrepreneurs finding ways to sell goods online. So this is what we call Facebook sellers. They've been doing this for 5 years. And even in 2017, we found that there were thousands and thousands of online sellers. So, so Cambodia actually has a pretty robust history of e-commerce. And having the e-commerce law, of course, helps us move that forward a bit. Next slide, please. So what we've heard, and this is actually current, this isn't from the old research, what we've heard about barriers to e-commerce from the private sector stakeholders, obviously, there's a lot of specific questions about the different implementing regulations, how the law can be interpreted, definitions that are out there. I can see already from the questions and answers that are being asked from the audience that people have very specific questions about some of the points within the law. I'm not going to cover that here, but I'll talk just very broadly about it. One of the main things we hear from private sector stakeholders is an uncertainty regarding the new implementing regulations and how they will be applied and who they apply to, especially what some of the definitions are. There's actually one thing that isn't technically covered here is there's a lot of concern was expressed about the national internet gateway and whether that will affect the ability to transact commerce. There were concerns about requirements for the coming cybersecurity and data protection laws. Sorry, that's a typo. And specifically how much additional cost and effort that might put on the private sector. We also heard that there's still challenges with customs clearance and procedures, especially around less than container load shipping, which is a lot of what e-commerce is. The final thing that continues to be mentioned, especially with respect to potentially requiring onshoring of data, is the high price of electricity, which really does increase costs for data centers. So these were some of the top concerns that businesses had. Next slide, please. But actually, on the other side of that, we heard a lot about why Cambodia is a great place to conduct e-commerce. One thing that was mentioned was the competitive marketplace for telecoms, data, and logistics, which helps to create competition and keep service high and prices low. Low prices regionally for data services and ISPs. Another thing we've heard is that the presence of a young entrepreneurial population with online sales experience is helping to provide labor and staff to help with e-commerce. Of course, Cambodia has something like 60% smartphone ownership now, and it's increasing. Obviously, in all the cities, I think people have smartphones. It's a mobile-first population. People experience the internet through their phones. And actually, one thing that is completely reversed from the research in 2017, people said in 2017 it was nearly impossible to make cashless payments. Now, as we all know, perhaps accelerated by the pandemic, it is quite easy to do that. Next slide, thanks. Further, this is actually perspectives on e-commerce market type and size. So one of the things we've heard from private sector business is that they do believe Cambodia can play a big role in e-commerce both in Cambodia and regionally within the ASEAN economic community, that its central location in the sort of northern part of Southeast Asia offers a lot of strategic advantages for producing and exporting goods and for shipping goods. We know that there are a tremendous number of planned public works improvements for ports, for roads, for rail connections that will further improve the advantages Cambodia has. So the business community does seem to think that Cambodia is well placed to have a very successful future in e-commerce. But again, there are some current concerns that I'll touch on in just a moment. And I think we all know this, but ASEAN is actually the fastest growing consumer region in the world in the next 10 years. It will become the third largest consumer market in the world by 2030, behind China and India. And there's a rapid shift to e-commerce across ASEAN. At present, it's 3% of all consumer sales. It's expected to go to 16%. I think it will be higher. The expected total addressable consumer e-commerce market is estimated at 84%. These are big, big numbers. It took the United States 25 years to get to 16% of sales by e-commerce. So the fact that it's happening so fast in the ASEAN region in Southeast Asia, it's a great opportunity for all of those nations, and especially, I think, for Cambodia. Next slide. I did want to mention, and this is something that we've heard a lot of concerns about. Services are included in the e-commerce registration requirements, and there are a lot of firms here that actually conduct e-commerce services that are not sure if they're covered by the e-commerce registration laws. So cross-border trade and digital services is one of the highest growth sectors in the world. E-commerce is not just physical goods. It is business process outsourcing for legal documents, for medical imaging analysis, for data management, for coding, for digital marketing, and more. This market is expected to increase to $5 trillion within the next 10 years, from just $500 billion now, so 20 times higher. And that's, I think, as we know, because people can communicate and work across borders much more easily. So this is a big opportunity as well, I think, that Cambodia can be a part of. Next slide. So again, one of the concerns some of the concerns we've heard are to ensure that Cambodia remains competitive for e-business and e-commerce regionally, and specifically to reduce uncertainty for the private sector to participate in e-business. And in terms of the uncertainty, there's a lot of companies we've heard from that have been here for a while that are doing digital services for cross-border to other nations. In fact, my company does that. We service Accenture, SAP. We do software development for those companies. We manage software projects for them. All of that business is conducted online. So similar to a company like Digital Divide Data that's been here for 10 or more years, they sell online, they do all the digital processing here, and that's all conducted online. So they're actually not sure. It appears to them that they may now need to get a license and a permit for e-commerce, but they're not entirely sure because they've been doing this for 10 years and didn't require one before. So these are a lot of the questions we're hearing from businesses. It's just as to whether they're covered or how they're covered. Do they need to now make a presentation about their business model to get that approved in order to get a license? So again, just going back to the last point here, a lot of private sector businesses are just uncertain about exactly how these new regulations apply to them, and just sort of looking for a little bit more clarity on that to make sure. Obviously, they don't want to run afoul of the regulations. They want to make sure they're compliant, but they're concerned about compliance. And I'll say one more thing. Another concern we did here was that some private sector businesses may be reluctant to engage in e-commerce with concerns about all of the volume of new regulations. And again, not wanting to be not in compliance. So some of them may be waiting to see what happens and let the law develop a little more before they enter. So that's a little bit of a concern, because we certainly don't want to have private sector companies waiting to get involved in e-commerce just to see how the new regulatory environment develops. Anyway, that's I think that's my last slide. Oh, next slide. One more slide. Yeah, so this is, as I was saying, more clarity on the implementing regulations, better definitions for what e-commerce is, and some uncertainty about that may slow business investment. So, for instance, again, we heard from a law firm that, you know, if they're advertising online and they conduct all their business online and form a contract online, that appears to be now that legal engagement is got to apply to legal services and the types of them. So anyway, that the concern here is it may slow development. But I think, again, more clarity about it will help get rid of those concerns. Next slide. Thanks. So anyway, further recommendations from the private sector include continuing to engage with the private sector, providing more information and clarity on the regulations so that businesses understand their obligations. They want to understand them and they want to comply, but there's you know, this is very new, so there are some concerns about that. And the other thing we heard in general was just to make sure that as we're developing these regulations in Cambodia, we take a path that is less restrictive and more open to allow the industry to grow quickly. That's something else we've heard. Just making sure that, you know, where there are regulations and requirements, we can manage them quickly so that these companies can come online and be part of the e-commerce environment. And next slide. And that's all. So thank you for the time to present the private sector perspective on that.
Thank you so much, Chris, for your insight from the private sector perspective. So the moment that we have waiting for, so I now moving on, and before I would like to thanks to all the speakers and His Excellency for your presentation in the beginning. So now I proceed to our panel discussion, introducing Mr. Simon Burlinson. He is the senior consultant at the FDL. He will be our moderators for today's session. And also on the panel, we have once again His Excellency Dararith. He will also join part of the panel. And introducing new Mr. Matthew Tippett. Matthew is currently the chairman of EuroCham ICT committee, and he's also the co-founder and CEO at Click Payment Cambodia. And joining us also Chris. Thank you for joining for the panel discussion. And also the last but not least, we'll also joined by Ms. Nearirath from the FDL legal expert and ADB consultant. So Simon, I now leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ratanak. And again, thank you very much to all our speakers and indeed to all our panelists to whom we now turn to pick their collective brains. Unfortunately, we don't have very much time in order to get through the vast number of questions that have come through. So we'll try and get through as many as we can. I'll not speak for long. So without further ado, we'll start with our first question, if I may, to Matthew. Hi, Matthew. How can micro, small and medium-size enterprises, MSMEs, and small-scale producers integrate into e-commerce platforms? And what do you think are the key strategies to support them?
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. It's an honor to be on the panel. To answer your question, I think the main thing for MSMEs is access to market and scalability, right? You are a small business, you want to access a general market, and that's the beauty of e-commerce and being able to be onboarded on an e-commerce platform. So we have in Cambodia a multitude of these e-commerce platforms, which are marketplaces effectively. And I think it's critical for these small businesses to join these platforms, and that's made relatively easy in Cambodia, actually, which is one of the key advantages.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And our next question, possibly best suited to Your Excellency, Mr. Dararith. Hi, and thank you. How many online businesses have already applied for a license and or permit with the MOC?
Okay. Okay, may I allow me to speak in Khmer, answer in Khmer language. រហូតដល់ពេលនេះចាប់តាំងពីយើងចេញសេចក្តីជូនដំណឹងជាសាធារណៈយើងមិនទាន់បានទទួលការស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតប្រកបអាជីវកម្មឬអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណឡើយទេយើងគ្រាន់តែបានទទួលជាការសួរនាំពីអ្នកចង់ស្នើសុំគឺគាត់មានការសួរនាំច្រើនបាទតាមទូរស័ព្ទក៏មានជួបផ្ទាល់ដល់ក្រសួងក៏មានដែរអញ្ចឹងគាត់នៅតែសួរនាំឡើយទេតែគាត់មិនទាន់បានស្នើសុំឡើយទេតែមូលហេតុនេះគឺអាចមកពីទី1គឺគាត់ទៅមិនដឹងបាទមិនទាន់រៀបរាប់ខ្លួនហើយគាត់កំពុងតែរៀបចំឯកសារផ្សេងៗដែលយើងបានជែកជូនគាត់ដូចជាឯកសារសំខាន់ដូចជា business model ដែលគាត់ត្រូវរៀបចំនេះគឺគាត់ត្រូវការពេលវេលាមួយចំនួនដែរអញ្ចឹងសរុបមកវិញអត់ទាន់មានដាក់ពាក្យស្នើសុំមួយណាឡើយទេបាទហើយតាមពិតទៅនៅក្នុងច្បាប់យើងមានដាក់ deadline សម្រាប់គាត់យ៉ាងយូរ6ខែទេដែលយើងចេញប្រកាសជាគ្រប់គ្រាន់ហើយយើងទុកពេល6ខែក៏ប៉ុន្តែនៅពេលនេះគឺក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មមិនទាន់ប្រកាសអំពី deadline នៅឡើយទេដោយសារយើងចង់ផ្សព្វផ្សាយសិនអញ្ចឹងដោយថ្ងៃនេះយើងធ្វើជាសិក្ខាសាលានេះមួយគឺជាចំណុចចាប់ដើមមួយហើយដែលយើងកំពុងតែផ្សព្វផ្សាយឲ្យគាត់ដឹងថាគាត់មានកាតព្វកិច្ច mandatory តម្រងសម្រាប់ការស្នើសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតឬអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណនេះឯងបាទអញ្ចឹងហើយយើងនឹងពិចារណាទុកពេលវេលាសមរម្យមួយបន្តមកទៀតបើសិនជាអត់ទាន់មានអ្នកមកសុំទៀតយើងនឹងចេញសេចក្តីជូនដំណឹងមួយទៀតដើម្បីកំណត់អំពី deadline តែម្ដងបាទសូមអរគុណ
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Very helpful. Next question, I think to Chris. I noted you spoke briefly to this in your presentation. It's one that I'm quite geeky, so it's quite close to my heart. With the growing number of transactions in several food tech platforms, obviously e-commerce, and there are millions of data points gathered, collected, processed, controlled. Use European data protection terminology. What kind of data privacy and cybersecurity framework can we expect to see in the future? And how near or far is that future?
Thanks, Simon. That's a great question. So there is a the e-commerce law itself actually does require that companies make efforts to protect their systems and protect data. There's a consumer protection law as well. There is a data privacy law that is being developed and a cybersecurity law. I've seen early drafts of that, and they do talk about the need to protect data. So I think obviously Cambodia is looking to global best practices for putting in place data privacy protections. As we saw in one of the earlier presentations, there's already requirements for being able to opt out of data of communications, which means a company needs to take you out of their database for communicating. So we're already seeing some of the basic requirements are in place, and frankly, a lot of the existing law covers data privacy. But I guess to answer your question specifically, it looks like those things are coming along very quickly. I would expect within the next year. To have actual things to reach the Council of Jurists and eventually to be approved. And we'll see exactly what's in those laws. But my understanding is that they follow sort of global best practices around requiring companies to secure individual data, data about individuals.
Sure, thank you very much. And we can see in the e-commerce law the interplay already with the consumer protection law. So Nearirath, I think the next one's for you. What is the scope of the new regulation for e-commerce? Quite a broad one. I think you spoke about that in your presentation. Does it apply, and this is a very common question, business to business or business to consumer, particularly in the pharma industry?
Thank you, Simon, for the questions. It's quite real comments. So I would like to address this a bit and not to stress so much whether your business or your platform, the purpose of your business, whether it's for the business to business or the business to customer. It doesn't matter as long as your services or your product sell or are put it online, available to customer. That's you are obliged to comply under the e-commerce regulations. And that's with that said, then you have to either get the permit from the MOC or you need to get the license from the MOC. That's very simple and straightforward. And I also see some question whether if some of the model of business, they probably have the objective that the business probably provide to B2B, like business to business, and also business to customer. Under the regulations of the e-commerce itself, there's only two types: is the payment service provider or intermediary. In the case that you provide both, the question would be like whether they need to apply to license or just one. And I would like to stress out that the law or under the sub-degree doesn't really specify on that. Then I probably have to ask Dararith to clarify on that in command. ខ្ញុំចង់សួរសំណួរមួយដែលខាងអ្នកចូលរួមរបស់យើងគាត់សួរអាយដាមDararith ចាគាត់មានសំណួរថាចាបើក្នុងករណីបើសិនជាគាត់ផ្ដល់សេវាទាំងក្នុងនាមជា payment service provider ផងហើយគាត់ផ្ដល់ជាតាំងខ្លួនជា intermediary ផងតែក្នុងករណីបើសិនជាគាត់ឲ្យ service ទាំងពីរអញ្ចឹងតើគាត់ require ត្រូវសុំ license ទាំងពីរឬក៏តែមួយទេ
បាទខ្ញុំសូមអរគុណចំពោះការលើកសំណួរនេះហើយក៏ខ្ញុំធ្លាប់ឮសំណួរនេះពីមុនមកដែរចាបាទអញ្ចឹងសំណួរទី1ពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹង platform មួយដែលជាអន្តរការីចាហើយមានអ្នកចូលទៅប្រើប្រាស់នៅក្នុង platform នេះជាប្រព័ន្ធផ្សេងមួយទៀតចាបាទអញ្ចឹងនៅបានលើកឡើងហើយថានៅក្នុងច្បាប់មិនអត់មានបញ្ជាក់ច្បាស់ទេថាអ្នកកាត់ platform នោះហើយនឹងអ្នកចូលទៅសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតឬ license សិនបានចូលទៅក្នុង platform បាទប៉ុន្តែនៅក្នុងប្រកាសបានយើងបានបញ្ជាក់ហើយថាយើងមិនតម្រូវឲ្យអ្នកដែលចូលទៅក្នុង platform នោះសុំលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតឬអនុញ្ញាតបានថែមមួយទៀតទេអញ្ចឹងគាត់មានកិច្ចសន្យាមួយជាមួយនឹងអ្នកដែលបង្កើត platform ឯងអន្តរការីហ្នឹងនៅក្នុងប្រកាសយើងឲ្យមានគំរូកិច្ចសន្យារវាងអន្តរការីនិងអ្នកផ្ដល់សេវាដែលប្រើប្រាស់ platform ឯងហ្នឹងហើយសំដៅទៅលើអ្វីដែលក្រសួងចង់បានគឺឲ្យគាត់មានការគោរពទៅនឹងមាត្រាទី27និង29នៃច្បាប់ e-commerce ដែលតម្រូវឲ្យមានព័ត៌មានបមាដើម្បីធានាការការពារដល់ការប្រើប្រាស់នោះបាទអញ្ចឹងយើងចង់គ្រប់គ្រងច្បាស់ជាងគេគឺកន្លែងនេះឯងអញ្ចឹងយើងបានគោលទៅឲ្យខាង platform នោះគាត់ជាអ្នកទទួលខុសត្រូវធ្វើកិច្ចសន្យាជាមួយអ្នកស្នើសុំដល់សេវានៅក្នុង platform របស់គាត់ហើយខាងក្រសួងនេះគឺមើលការខុសត្រូវទៅលើ platform របស់គាត់សិនជាមានបញ្ហាកើតឡើងដែលខុសពីលក្ខខណ្ឌក្រសួងតម្រូវឲ្យគាត់មានជាកិច្ចសន្យានោះយើងនឹងអាចមានវិធានការផ្លូវច្បាប់លើគាត់ដូចជាការដកហូត license ដូចជាការបញ្ឈប់ license ឲ្យគាត់ជាការផាកពិន័យជាដើមបាទអញ្ចឹងសរុបមកវិញគឺមិនតម្រូវឲ្យមានការសូមពីរដងទេព្រោះគាត់ចូលទៅក្នុង platform គឺគាត់តែតាក់ទងជាមួយខាងចាស់ platform ទៅហើយគាត់មានកិច្ចសន្យាជាមួយ platform តាមគំរូដែលបានបង្កទុកនៅក្រសួងវិស្វកម្ម តែប៉ុណ្្នឹងបានបាទហើយសំណួរមួយទៀតពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹងអ្នកដែលមាន platform ហើយគាត់ចង់ធ្វើអាជីវកម្មមួយទៀតអញ្ចឹងយើងមិនតម្រូវឲ្យយើងតម្រូវឲ្យគាត់មាន license ផ្សេងណាអញ្ចឹងជាអន្តរការីគឺមានលក្ខខណ្ឌមួយផ្សេងបាទហើយឡែកតែបើគាត់ជា license ធ្វើ operator ធម្មតាជាលក់ធម្មតាគឺគាត់ត្រូវសុំមួយទៀតបាទអញ្ចឹងអត់អាចជ្រកនៅក្រោម platform របស់គាត់នោះដើម្បីគាត់លក់សេវារបស់គាត់តែបានទេបាទសូមអរគុណ
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. That's incredibly helpful. A question that is significantly prevalent amongst others is the extraterritorial effect of the e-commerce regulations and whether they apply to overseas companies that don't have a legal presence in Cambodia. It's a general question for all, but I suppose if I can start with Chris, if I may.
So Simon, the question is,
do e-commerce regulations apply to overseas companies that don't have a commercial or legal presence in Cambodia?
Well, actually, that is a big concern. Recently, I think many people are aware that YouTube stopped allowing advertisements in Cambodia, and the expectation from the company was concerned that it was in violation by not having a registered office here. And I know that there was a discussion between Google, the owner of YouTube, and Alphabet, and the Ministry of Commerce, and they're working toward a resolution on that. But it is a good question about whether a lot of software providers globally who sell cloud services or software as a service would in fact be interested to register locally in a company like Cambodia. And I suspect part of it, as is typical in these situations, might be based on size, right? So, we have 15 million people, Vietnam has 100 million people, maybe there's a dividing line there. But that's a very good question that remains to be seen what the answer is.
Okay, thank you very much. We have questions from attendees that relates to essentially what happens to existing businesses that haven't yet complied with the requirements stipulated by the e-commerce law. Could you share with us experience in Cambodia of how companies are implementing the law and the things they are doing to in advance of further clarification coming? I think possibly to Matthew or Nearirath.
I could go first. As His Excellency Dararith already mentions that, like usually once the law implemented or enforced, usually they allow the customer, allow the company or the individual who are governed under this law to have 6 months to comply. So I believe that you probably try to comply with what you can do with your platform at the beginning, the recommendation, the mandatory compliance that I just mentioned. Probably you can do that by now. And also, at the meantime, you probably try to gather all the documents and information in order to apply for license or permit that Excellency just mentioned, all the requirements. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And in order to encourage more registrations under these e-commerce regulations, are there going to be any transitional provisions in terms of penalty exemptions for companies that are or have, prior to the implementation of the e-commerce regulations, operated an e-commerce business? to His Excellency, Mr. Dararith, if I may.
Lời trong chạy chun tha nó không sẽ bắt cứ như bạn đang ở phía tha dương nhân dập về mùi khai nó cứ sầm tái từ lư trong hôn cứ chỉ phải có đã ban nên cũng phung và vừa chỉ phải cam tam còn lịch lịch hỏi bản chất cứ quạt thời điểm trong luôn nó dập về mùi khai chạm về chun đánh tỏ tư chân dương tục về là quạt đại hỏi nên tận tâm tăng ca tục về lít của dương ban cái cam sập sai tràn chi dương cái cam sập sai trànของพอดตายทั่วตะบ้านตามทุกเทียบvà តាមការធ្វើជូនដំណឹងតាមធ្វើជាសិក្ខាសាលាអីចឹងជាដើមនេះយើងនឹងខំប្រឹងប្រែងអស់លទ្ធភាពក្នុងរយៈពេល6ខែដើម្បីគាត់បានមកសូមការអនុញ្ញាតប៉ុន្តែយើងក៏អាចបត់បែនបានក្នុងកលៈទេសៈមួយដែរប្រសិនជាការផ្សព្វផ្សាយយើងមិនទាន់គ្រប់គ្រាន់ទេអញ្ចឹងយើងអាចស្នើសុំទៅថ្នាក់នាំដើម្បីអាចពន្យាពេលក្នុងរយៈពេលណាមួយទៀតគួរសមរម្យដើម្បីឲ្យគាត់នឹងមានពេលគ្រប់គ្រាន់រួចរាល់ដើម្បីមកសុំ license បាទអញ្ចឹងយើងមានពីរដាច់ដោយឡែកគ្នាទី1គឺអ្នកដែលកំពុងធ្វើអាជីវកម្មហើយទី2ក្រុមហ៊ុនថ្មីដែលត្រូវបង្កើតបាទអញ្ចឹងយើងនឹងអាចរៀបចំឲ្យបានច្បាស់លាស់ថាអ្នកដែលបង្កើតថ្មីចេញថ្មីគឺស្នើសុំឲ្យគាត់សុំមកហើយបាទរៀបចំសុំបាទចំពោះអ្នកអាចារ្យនេះគឺទុកពេលឲ្យគាត់រៀបចំខ្លួនឲ្យបានរួចរាល់គឺរយៈពេល6ខែសិនបាទសូមអរគុណហើយសូមបញ្ជាក់ថែមតិចទៀតដែរបានតាក់ទងរឿងថាផាកពិន័យហើយបានលើកឡើងនេះ penalty នេះគឺយើងមិនទាន់យកទៅអនុវត្តភ្លាមទេបាទយើងនឹងមានការលើកលែងគ្រាន់តែឲ្យគាត់ជាជាមធ្វើម៉េចដាក់ឲ្យទាន់ពេលវេលាសិនទៅការផាកពិន័យការផាកអីនេះគឺយើងនឹងពិចារណាលើកលែងគាត់រហូតដល់ពេលកម្រិតមួយដែលយើងផ្សព្វផ្សាយគ្រប់គ្រាន់ហើយមកយើងអនុវត្តបាទអរគុណបាទអរគុណ
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed for that full and complete answer. I think we've got time for possibly one more question to relates to Article 46, e-payment transactions. Does the e-payment business, are they required to obtain a license from the MBC first and then so it's the timeline, MPTC online certificate, then MOC, then NBC. What is the timeline for obtaining from the MBC a license for e-payment transactions? Perhaps to Matthew or to Nearirath?
Hello. When it comes to the NBC license, generally, one of the things we've noted, because we're in the process of getting the license as we have the agreement in principle, generally the first process is to get the license, and then we go back to the MOC to change effectively the business activities to add payment as we have the license. Now, as this is new law, where clearly we're still waiting to see the first person to apply for getting the permit or the license, I would assume that it happens after. But I'd love to hear from Nearirath if she has a different view.
Thank you, Matthew. So I think for those who would like to operate like a payment service provider, or they want to, have the electronic money or something like that, in any of this scope, you need to get a license from the NBC. We call a payment service provider, and And usually even before you form a company, usually you need to apply for the NBC first, whether you meet the minimum requirement by the NBC before you set up a company, and then you cannot get the license. That's the whole purpose. Then once you go to the NBC, and then you get the approval in principle from the NBC, a letter where they say that, okay, you can get license only if you have the entity in Cambodia registered with the MOC and then TDT, then have the minimum capital and all the requirement for the PSP license, and then you can come back and get the license. That's how the process, how it works. And that's that question, because the e-payment or the payment service provider usually has to be on the platform or on the app, right? Then those transactions or businesses also via the electronic communication were also applicable under the e-commerce law. So the question would be whether all the payment service provider or the bank that already have the license from the NBC are required to get another additional license from the MOC, and also whether they need to get the online certificate from MPTC or not. That I think the law is not clear. Then probably we need to get the IDOM on the to clarify on that. Then I will speak in comment on that to IDOM. IDOM ខាងអ្នកចូលរួមគាត់មានសំណួរមួយទៀតឯកឧត្តមថាក្នុងករណីចាអូខេ
អរគុណច្រើននៅក្នុង
ចឹងឯកឧត្តមឆ្លើយចា
បាទខ្ញុំសូមបញ្ជាក់ជូនដែរនៅក្នុងមាត្រាទី25បាទ25គឺនិយមន័យនៅក្នុងនិយមន័យលេខ25បាទអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងនេះគឺយើងក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មនឹងដល់ជាអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណនិង license ឲ្យតែចំណុចទី1ទី4ទី5ទី6និងទី7បាទអញ្ចឹងយើងបានឃើញដែរនៅក្នុងនិយមន័យចំណុចទី5បាទមានអស់គ្នាឬមួយក៏ខ្ញុំត្រូវអានណានឹងរបស់យើងអត់បាទនេះយើងឲ្យប៉ុណ្ណេះនេះនេះបានឲ្យយើងបានបាទអញ្ចឹងនិយាយចំមកសំណួរដែលយើងសួរមិញហ្នឹងគឺមិនតម្រូវឲ្យមកសុំ license ឬលិខិតអនុញ្ញាតនៅក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មទៀតទេបាទអត់មានមកតម្រូវឲ្យសុំទៀតទេអញ្ចឹងគាត់បានpermit ឬ license ពីខាង NBC ឬ presided ហើយគឺគាត់អាចដំណើរការធ្វើកិច្ចការរបស់គាត់តាមនឹងបានហើយមិនបាច់តម្រូវឲ្យមកស្នើសុំ license មួយទៀតពីក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មទេបាទអរគុណច្រើន
Thank you very much. And I think another one for Your Excellency, Mr. Dararith, do you envisage applications for e-commerce licenses and permits to be predominantly submitted in hard copy or electronically, or a combination of both?
សូមបញ្ជាក់ជូនថាក្នុងកលៈទេសៈនេះគឺយើងមិនទាន់មានប្រព័ន្ធស្វ័យប្រវត្តិកម្ម automation សម្រាប់ licensing ហើយនិង permit ទាំងមូលទេដោយសារយើងត្រូវការពេលវេលាដើម្បីអនុវត្ត system នោះឲ្យបានត្រឹមត្រូវហើយសាកល្បងវាបានដើរត្រឹមត្រូវប៉ុន្តែដើម្បីជាបដោះអាសន្ននេះឥឡូវគឺយើងមានជា website មួយដែលយើងអាចបាទដែលអាចទាញយកគំរូជា hard copy ទៅបំពេញហើយគាត់ submit មកវិញនៅក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មដោយ person បានថាគាត់ត្រូវទៅមកក្រសួងទី2គាត់អាចផ្ញើតាម email មកវិញគឺយើងមាន page មួយដែលគាត់អាចចូលក្នុង page ហ្នឹងហើយគាត់អាច download ក៏បានគាត់អាចបំពេញក្នុង page ក៏បានដែរហើយគាត់ផ្ញើជា mail មកវិញយើងទទួលបានដែរអញ្ចឹងយើងមាន2ជម្រើសទី1គឺអាចមកដោយផ្ទាល់នៅក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មដែលបំពេញពាក្យស្នើសុំដោយដៃទី2គឺគាត់អាចបំពេញតាម online ដែរប៉ុន្តែវាមិនមែន full ទេ half online หมายថាគាត់ ដាក់ពី online ទេបាទគាត់អត់ទាន់ធ្វើ payment ឬមួយក៏ទទួល certificate online បានទេបាទនឹងសូមបញ្ជាក់ឡើងវិញគាត់អាចធ្វើពីជម្រើសទី1គឺអាច submit application នឹងតាម online បាននៅទី2គឺគាត់ submit ផ្ទាល់នៅក្រសួងបាទប៉ុន្តែការធ្វើ process payment ឬមួយក៏ចេញជា permit ឬមក license នឹង online អត់ទាន់បានទេយើងត្រូវការពេលវេលាមួយរយៈទៀតអរគុណច្រើន
Thank you very much. And another very common question, if I may, relates to offshore companies providing services to Cambodian citizens or companies. How do the e-commerce regulations affect these entities? A question possibly either to Chris or to Your Excellency, Mr. Dararith again.
That remains a very good question. So I think we would seek clarification from the royal government on that. Whether I do know there was a process issued requiring overseas businesses to pay VAT tax, to collect tax and pay it. But I'm not sure what other regulations they would be required to be part of. So I think we need more information from the government on that.
But
okay, thank you very much. Sorry, go on, please.
ពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងសំណួរនេះគឺយើងមើលទៅអនុក្រឹត្យមាត្រាទី2អនុក្រឹត្យមាត្រាទី2គឺសំដៅ scope របស់អនុក្រឹត្យឯង ចឹងអនុក្រឹត្យនឹងសំដៅទៅការអនុវត្តនៅលើប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាហើយពីប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាទៅក្រៅប្រទេសបាទចឹងយើងអត់មាន cover ពីខាងក្រៅចូលមកក្នុងទេបាទចឹង transaction ហ្នឹងគឺអាចពីនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាបាទចឹងពីក្នុងទៅក្រៅប្រទេសឬពីក្រៅប្រទេសមកក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាដែរបាទអញ្ចឹងសរុបមកវិញគឺទាំងអស់ទាំងក្នុងនិងក្រៅប្រទេសយើង cover ទាំងអស់
Okay, thank you. And is an offshore foreign business required to set up a branch office exclusively, or can it set up a limited liability company as well? The e-commerce law specifically refers to branch offices. Would you be able to clarify that for us?
Yes. ដោយសារច្បាប់យើងបានកំណត់ច្បាស់ហើយថាអ្នកដែលស្នើសុំអាជ្ញាប័ណ្ណដាច់ខាតត្រូវតែជានីតិបុគ្គលឬសាខាក្រុមហ៊ុនបរទេសបាទអញ្ចឹងនីតិបុគ្គលនឹងគឺសម្ដៅនីតិបុគ្គលដែលបានបង្កើតតាមច្បាប់ខ្មែរយើងអត់សម្ដៅទៅនីតិបុគ្គលដែលបង្កើតនៅច្បាប់បរទេសទេនីតិបុគ្គលបង្កើតនៅច្បាប់ខ្មែរគឺជាប្រភេទក្រុមហ៊ុនដែលសូមចុះបញ្ជីនៅក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មនៅក្នុងប្រជាជនកម្ពុជានោះហើយតែឡែកបើសិនជាក្រុមហ៊ុននោះជានីតិបុគ្គលនៅក្រៅប្រទេសជាងគាត់ត្រូវតែបង្កើតជាសាខាឬជាបុត្រសម្ព័ន្ធជា subsidiary ដែលចុះបញ្ជីនៅក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មបាទសម្រាប់ឲ្យគាត់តែបង្កើតជា subsidiary ប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំគិតថាខាងពុនដែរគាត់មានចេញជាប្រកាសមួយដែរពាក់ព័ន្ធនឹងការយកពុនចំពោះ e-commerce transaction នេះឯងអញ្ចឹងអាចមានម្យ៉ាងទៀតគឺគេតម្រូវឲ្យខាងក្រុមហ៊ុននោះគាត់បញ្ចង់មកចុះបញ្ជីបង្កើតជាសាខាឬជា subsidiary ទេតែគាត់អាចរកដៃគូក្រុមហ៊ុនខ្មែរនៅស្រុកខ្មែរនេះបាទជាអ្នកទទួលខុសត្រូវចំពោះការបង់ពន្ធអីហ្នឹងជាមួយនឹងខាងក្រុមហ៊ុនគាត់នឹងឯងបាទអញ្ចឹងត្រូវមានដៃគូក្រុមហ៊ុននៅក្នុងស្រុកមួយបាទជើងតែបានចុះបញ្ជីនៅក្នុងប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាបាទអរគុណ
Can I just have a follow-up question on that? So right now, my company buys a lot of services from Facebook. Facebook is not registered here. Now they have a partner, but for many years, because they were not registered, we collected and paid withholding tax 14% as required by law. Is that still an option if a company is not registered here, that a business in Cambodia can still buy services from offshore? But if the company is not registered, we pay the withholding tax as has been the case in the past, or now do they have to register?
cross border e-commerce នេះត្រូវមានក្រសួងផ្សេងទៀតដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធតាំងពីស្ថាប័នគយតាំងពីគុនដាយជាដើមបាទអញ្ចឹងត្រូវមានការសហការទៀតហើយខាងក្រសួងពាណិជ្ជកម្មក៏ត្រៀមខ្លួនដើម្បីធ្វើការរួមគ្នាជាមួយខាងស្ថាប័នពាក់ព័ន្ធដូចជាខាងគយជាខាងគុនដាយជាដើមដើម្បីរកដំណោះស្រាយមួយថាគិតគូរយ៉ាងណាចំពោះការក្រុមហ៊ុនបរទេសតែគាត់មាន transaction ជា e-commerce នៅក្នុងស្រុកខ្មែរឯងបាទសូមអរគុណ
Thank you very much, and indeed, and I'm very conscious of the time. We could go on for hours with this discussion. I mean, the law was issued in 2019, and is still generating a huge amount of traction and interest. But I'm afraid that's all we have time for. So another big thank you to all our panelists, His Excellency Mr. Dararith, Chris McCarthy from Mango Tango Asia, Ms. Nearirath SRENG, our ADB consultant and legal advisor from DFDL, and Matthew Tippett, chairman of the EuroCham ICT committee and co-founder of CLIck. If I think we've just got enough time, if you have any closing remarks. If not, we'll hand over to His Excellency for the closing remarks. Thank you very much for your attendance. And thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you indeed to all the panelists and His Excellency Director for the insightful discussion. Yes, just like you said, the panel can go on hours, and I think we also receive many questions, and also sorry to our viewers that some of the questions could not be answered. But I think as soon as the COVID situation in Cambodia continue to improve, I'm sure we will have another opportunities in the near future to discuss this topic. So once again, thank you. And before I pass on the floor for the closing remark, I once again would like to thank EuroCham partners for their support once again throughout this year, and our newest members who joined EuroCham this year. And to those companies who are in viewer today who are not yet a member of EuroCham, feel free to visit our website or contact one of our teams to get more information. So also I have been informed that His Excellency SOK Sopheak unfortunately could not join us for the opening remarks, but His Excellency Dararith will close the remark on his behalf. So His Excellency Dararith, I now pass on the floor for your closing remark. Thank you. Sorry, Excellency, we cannot hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. On behalf of Excellencies SOK Sopheak, that he's busy with another meeting, so he passed his opportunity to closing remark to me. So on behalf of him, I would like to say thank you for all speaker, moderator, and also the organizer, ADB, EuroCham, that have organized a very important webinar in order for Ministry of Commerce as the regulator on permits to explore our graduate to the company, to the customer that are already doing the online business transaction in Cambodia, and also to company or people who would like to start the business online, to know about the mandatory that they had to get permit or license before they start their business. I think the Ministry of Commerce will join with other partner in order to have such important seminar or workshop in order to disseminate all the regulation law to the company or the people who are involved in doing business online. Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Excellency SOK Sopheak. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Excellency, panelists, moderators, EuroCham team, representative from Ministry of Commerce, our partners, ADB, for today's webinar session. Thank you all. And once again, the recorded version of this webinar will be available very soon in the coming day on EuroCham social medias and also YouTube channels. So for those who have missed the webinar today, can also once again watch it on our YouTube channel in the coming days. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to having you again in EuroCham upcoming webinars. Thank you.